Yeah, and with the back pain, it had gotten so bad by 2019. I ended up seeing a neurosurgeon, and I had 3 compressed discs. These discs were basically useless, and they were causing severe strain on my sciatic nerve. And so the whole left side of my body was just always tingling. And I felt like if this keeps up, I'm going to get neuropathy. I'm going to lose feeling on that nerve. So there was a somewhat of a risky surgery that he proposed. It was a laminectomy where they go in, they remove. They don't do anything to the discs. The discs are still screwed, but they go in and they remove the back plate of your vertebrae at the L5S1. And I said, I'm in so much pain. Like anything is better. I mean, hell, if he paralyzes me, at least I probably won't feel anything anymore. I was kind of that desperate.
Work, work, go and earn my pay. Work, work, boots on and lace them up.
All right. Carnivore Soldier coming at you from Austin, Texas. Today, we got another episode in our podcast called Mission Carnivore. And this is the podcast and video series dedicated to first responders and veterans and how the carnivore diet has affected their lives. And today, we got a special guest, Bradley Brinka. Hey, Bradley, how you doing, man?
Hey, Larry, thanks so much for having me on. I'm not a very long-time listener, but a first-time caller, as it were. And I heard you on Dr. Anthony Chafee's channel. I think you were on there maybe a month or so ago. And I was really excited to hear someone talking about carnivore from a military perspective. I think that's really sorely needed in this world.
Yeah, I agree. I think the military perspective is a little different, and it's nice to talk with other vets and first responders because, like I said, we're the warrior class, right? We're used to talking amongst ourselves and not really taking it outside the community. I think a lot of issues like our health issues and our mental issues, it's easier to talk to other vets that have done it, that have been there. So why don't you just tell me about yourself real quick? You can go ahead and just start like where you're from, where you're born, and then we can roll into your service.
Yeah, sure thing. So I live in Northern Virginia now with my wife. We've been here for about 2 years, but I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. Went to school there in Akron, grew up in Cleveland on the west side. I went to University of Akron, did ROTC there as a young cadet. I commissioned straight into the Army as a second lieutenant after graduating. Commissioned as an armor officer, 19 series. So I trained on the M1 Abrams down at Fort Benning. And after that, I went to airborne school. And then I got stationed up in Fort Richardson, Alaska, we're called J-Bear, up in Anchorage in the southern part of the state. And I was there as an Arctic Paratrooper for the next 3 years, served as a scout platoon leader, as an XO, learned how to survive in the cold. Learning to be a soldier was one thing. Learning to be a soldier in the cold is a completely different skill set that no amount of training will prepare you for until you experience it. I did my 4 years. I thought I was going to be in forever. I was going to be until I was, I don't know, a full bird colonel or a general someday. I ended up getting out after 4 years. I found the Army to be a lot of drudgery. This was 2016, so a lot of the deployments were starting to really dry up at that point for the conventional units. Afghanistan was slowing down. There really weren't many conventional deployments to Iraq at that point. So I got out. I had saved up some money. I did some traveling for about a year. I kind of went all over the Middle East. I did some volunteer work, some medical work. Ended up coming back the next year, rejoined the Army as a reservist this time. As I like to say, I stopped selling my body to Uncle Sam for money and started selling my brain because I became an MI officer instead. Became an all-source analyst. Did that. It was pretty uneventful for the next 3 years. In the meantime, I was going back to school. I was going back to grad school, studied Arabic. That was my degree of focus. Ended up becoming an Arabic linguist, passed the DLPT. I speak Iraqi Arabic, Syrian Arabic, really into languages and cultures.
And the DLPT is the Defense Language Proficiency Test. Is that right?
So there's a reading version, there's a listening version, and there's a speaking test you can take as well.
Right.
So I took all 3.
Such a slacker.
It's probably, there's incentive pay. They pay you money for learning a language, specific languages like Arabic, certain Arabic dialects. The Army, regardless of what you're doing, we're kind of unique. I don't think the other branches do this, but in the Army, you could be a cook or a mechanic. And if you speak one of these critical languages, they'll just pay you extra tax-free money every month. But just given how long it takes to learn a language, I'm not sure it's really worth it. Considering how many years it takes you to get to a level where you could maybe make $150 or $200 more a month. Yeah. But anyway, I did it. I didn't do it for the money. I just really enjoyed learning the language. And so a couple years later, fast forward to 2020, I'm still in the reserves and I get called back to active duty, this time in support of a special operations mission. So I was an analyst supporting JSOC in Iraq from 2020 to 21. And it was actually during that time that I started experimenting with certain dietary interventions, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. But in the years preceding that, I'll kind of go backwards a little bit. I had a lot of health problems. Shortly after I got off active duty, started experiencing lower back pain, sciatica down my left side. I don't know how much I can attribute that to the airborne life, to kind of the military life in general. I mean, it was obviously very hard on my body, but I was certainly not taking care of my health either, and certainly in terms of the diet. My philosophy back when I was 22, 23 years old was that I'm young, I'm invincible, and I can drink as much beer and eat as much pizza as I want because I'm going to burn 1,500 calories at the gym in the morning. And that kind of worked for a while, but it was ultimately not very sustainable. I went into the Army, I was 215, I was 215 pounds. By the time I got off active duty 4 years later, I think I had gotten up to close to 240. So I put on about 25 pounds in those 4 years. And that was in spite of running all the time. I was always at the gym, I was always running, I was always in the sauna. And my philosophy was like, I don't care about nutrition. It's a simple math equation, right? It's calories in, calories out. I just got to burn off more if I want to lose weight.
I was right there with you. Yeah, I was right there with you. I was doing the same thing. But when I went back in, I was like 35 because I came back in 2004 when the war broke out and all. I did my first tour, 84 to 90, fast attack submarines, right? Came out, went to National Guard. After that, because I'd already started my career and didn't want to like give up my career, but I still wanted to contribute to the military. But I was totally with you because when I rejoined, I think I was about 240, and my body weight just crept up the whole time until I was 50. I was at 50 years old. I was about 252, 253. And yeah, same thing. I thought calories in, calories out. I just need to row more. I need to run more. I need to, and cut back how much and starve myself. That's what I thought. So I was with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And with the back pain, it had gotten so bad by 2019, I ended up seeing a neurosurgeon, and I had 3 compressed discs. These discs were basically useless, and they were causing severe strain on my sciatic nerve. And so the whole left side of my body was just always tingling. And I felt like if this keeps up, I'm going to get neuropathy. I'm going to lose feeling on that nerve. So there was somewhat of a risky surgery that he proposed. It was a laminectomy where they go in, they don't do anything to the discs. The discs are still screwed. But they go in and they remove the back plate of your vertebrae at the L5S1. And I said, I'm in so much pain. Like anything is better. I mean, hell, if he paralyzes me, at least I probably won't feel anything anymore. I was kind of that desperate. And the surgery was no fun to recover from, but it was very successful. Within maybe 6 months, my pain was 95% less than what it had been before surgery. So I was very happy with the result. But I had this kind of lingering stiffness in my lower back. Doing a sit-up was like very uncomfortable. And I had a lot of scar tissue. And I just thought, well, I'm just going to have that for life. And that's a trade-off I was pretty happy with. And it was something I thought that you couldn't get rid of.
Yeah.
I was to find out otherwise it was one of the unforeseen consequences of changing the diet a couple of years later, actually.
Yeah, I had several injuries too, and I wish I would have been airborne, so I could have said my ankle injury was from like some badass night drop or something, Yeah. But it wasn't. But I still had the injuries, right? And like you, and my back injury. Oh, my back was always painful. I could not deadlift like I used to. I couldn't do any of the stuff I used to do. But I tell you what, this is an amazing diet because when you remove poison from your body in large quantities, so we were eating a large quantity of poison every day. I was anyway, thinking I was eating healthy too, like Quest bars and all this garbage. I thought, yeah, this is healthy. I'm doing the keto thing. That's pretty healthy. No, not good enough. You got to get the seed oils, the sugar, all the processed food out. And once you do, man, the body does magic. I don't know about you. I feel like I'm 50, almost 58. I'll be 58 May 4th. May the 4th be with you. At 58, I feel like I'm in my 30s, like my early 30s. Like I feel I'm sprinting, I'm lifting in the gym, I'm doing deadlifts, I'm doing squats, I'm doing all this crazy stuff that I thought for the rest of my life was done. I thought I'd never be here again. I thought I'd never run again because I couldn't even run. I had a walking profile because of my ankle and my back. And I thought, well, that's it. I'm never running again. And man, in less than a year, all this stuff happened. So you're talking about your back. Was that kind of your reason for experimenting with diet? What was your diet like before you found carnivore? What were you experimenting? What did you start with and why? And then how'd you
Yeah.
get to carnivore?
So I had tried some different diets over the years. The one I remember doing was some version of paleo early on in my Army career. That was like eating nuts and kale,
Yeah.
and it was just like you felt like a rabbit, you know. But other than that, I never really tried, other than the calorie restriction. That was, I had this philosophy. My thought was that like what you're eating, the actual content doesn't matter. That
That's
it
what I
is-
thought.
But again, it's purely the math equation, right?
Yeah.
And so if I can just either reduce the calories or increase how much I'm burning, then that's going to be the difference maker. So I ate a very high carbohydrate diet. I didn't really restrict myself. I ate a lot of snacks. I have an insatiable sweet tooth. That's always been like my Achilles heel. I love chocolate, anything sweet. Chocolate, M&Ms, Reese's, you name it. I love it. I was like notorious for always having snacks. And when you're in the field, my God, just because of the garbage that we're eating with these MREs,
Right.
you get these absolutely crazy sugar cravings. And you just, all you want is like a bag of Sour Patch Kids or sour Skittles if you can get them in an MRE.
Yeah.
And your body just craves that because you're burning absolute garbage in the food that you're eating. You're not, it's really, it's weird because you're overweight and you think, well, the problem is that I have too many calories or I'm not burning them off enough. But really what you're suffering from is undernourishment, is malnourishment in some sense.
Right.
And that never occurred to me until I finally got around to keto and then eventually the carnivore diet years later. I finally got tired of just banging my head against the wall. On that deployment in 2020, I was about 6 months into it. And my weight was hovering around 230, 235.
How tall are you?
I'm 6'3".
Okay. You're my height. Okay.
And I was running. I'd gotten really into running after my back surgery because I'm like, well, I can't lift anymore. I'm never going to lift again, basically. Nothing heavy anyway. Nothing more than dumbbells. So I kind of given up on lifting. And I was like, well, I'm just a runner. I'm just going to do cardio now. That's how I'm going to stay fit. And what I found was that in order to keep my weight even without going up or to drop the weight, I had to do an insane amount of cardio. And it became like an arms race where you're doing increasingly more cardio. Your body is increasingly hungry. And so you're necessarily eating more. And in turn, you have to run more to burn off that much more than you ate. And that's not sustainable because, you get to a point where you need to take a break. You can't run every day. You can't run 7 miles every day, which is about what I was running at the time. Your shins get tired. I'm flat-footed. Like I'm not really well built for running. My shins are on fire. I'm like really sore. I'm like, this is miserable. But if I stop, I'm going to gain weight. I'm so damn hungry. And I had a friend who had told me about a ketogenic diet. And she had some success with it. She had lost some weight. And I said, well, whatever. I didn't think much of it. And she sent me a couple videos. And I had all the time in the world on deployment. You're just stuck on this base you can go down a lot of rabbit holes when you're on deployment. You have access to the internet. Yeah. And you're not that busy. And I watched a couple lectures. I think a few talks by Gary Taubes and by Dr. Robert Lustig and a few other people at like one of those low carb down under conferences. And they're talking about the benefits of doing either a low carb diet or intermittent fasting. And I was particularly interested when people were talking about diet from a kind of anthropological perspective. When they're talking about different native tribes, what did the Native Americans eat before they adopted a Western European diet? Or the Inuit eating in the early 20th century in these different African tribes? And it's like, well, they're eating all meat and they're not fat. And that's kind of weird. Never really didn't have a paradigm to where that made sense in my head. And I thought, well, I'm clearly not having any success with this whole calories in, calories out thing. So why don't I just give it a try? And so I just decided on a whim one night on deployment. I said, tomorrow I'm not going to eat any snacks, no sugar, no Dr. Peppers. I have 2 or 3 of those a day.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do any of that. And I'm going to go to the DFAC. This is going to be a pretty dirty keto because you're at an Army DFAC.
DFAC keto, yeah.
It's DFAT keto. I have no idea how well this is going to go, but I'm going to load up my plate. It was kind of a serve yourself type DFAT, so you could take as much as you wanted. And I took all the meat I wanted, all the protein. I said, I'm going to take as much protein, as much fat, as much cheese, eggs. And back then I was still eating vegetables, so I would get like bell peppers and things like that. And I threw it in a big styrofoam container and took it away with me. And some people talk about, when do you notice the effects of keto or carnivore? For me, I noticed that first meal because I couldn't finish that plate of food. And I said, that's very strange, because normally I would get 2 or 3 plates filled with carbohydrates and cereals and snacks, and I'd still be hungry at the end. And I made it maybe 3/4 of the way through that plate of food. It was all like beef and eggs and a couple of strips of bell pepper and cheese, and I was stuffed within 15 minutes. And I said, that's very weird. And I didn't feel any desire to keep eating, maybe a couple hours later. And I said, oh, okay, well, we'll see how tomorrow goes. And the same thing the next day. I was kind of restricting the time that I was eating too. So I was combining intermittent fasting with this very dirty Army DFAT keto. And I weighed myself for the first time after 48 hours. I lost like 5 pounds in the first day. I'm like, I didn't even run. I didn't do any lift. I didn't do any workout.
Oops.
I didn't feel hungry at any point. I said, this is very strange. And I think that first night, that was really my first introduction to satiety, like really understanding it.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking, I'm like, have I ever had a meal without carbohydrates? Like, I can't even remember that time in my life where I would deliberately forego having bread or chips or something, some kind of carbohydrate to go. I'm like, well, maybe I don't need carbohydrates. And so within the first week, I lost 10 pounds or so. And after that first week, I was really off to the races. I said, there's no limit to where I can go with this. I was like a true believer within 7 days. And this was not even a full carnivore diet. God knows what they were cooking any of this food in. So I'm sure there were plenty of seed oils. And I'm sure it was cooked in the cheapest stuff possible. But even in that extremely dirty keto, I was seeing results. And I was seeing them fast. The baby fat on my face that I had had for my entire adult life, like it was disappearing. My face was becoming thinner. Yeah. So it wasn't just that the scale was changing, because I'd seen that before. Yeah, I could lose. I had lost 15, 20 pounds before, as far as the scale's concerned, because I just ran myself into the ground during the summer and sat in the sauna a lot. But this was a different kind of weight loss. There was clearly like visceral fat that was disappearing that had never disappeared before. I was losing, visceral fat on my belly. I was like seeing my ribs and a bit of my abs underneath. And meanwhile, I'm actually doing way less physical activity than I had been doing for 6 months prior. So that was towards the tail end of the deployment when I started it. By the time I got home 3 months later, I had lost 35, 40 pounds, probably, in a very short span of time. I had gotten down at one point to about 190 pounds, which I had not been that weight since I was in high school. Like maybe my senior year of high school was the last time I'd seen that number, like anything below 200. And what was remarkable about it is that it was sustainable. I didn't feel famished. I felt full after every meal. But I think the other critical factor, the reason it was working so well, is that all of those cravings for the Oreos and the chips and all my favorite snacks and poke bait when I'm on deployment, they disappeared within a couple days of starting that diet. And I had never had those. I'd always had those cravings. They never disappeared. They could be, you could just eat enough and you would eat enough Oreo cookies where you don't run anymore, you're physically ill. But I'd never gotten rid of the urge to eat sugar without eating sugar. And so it was such a paradigm shift for me.
It's kind of like Thanksgiving. I like to think of Thanksgiving. This Thanksgiving is my first carnivore Thanksgiving I had. And every Thanksgiving before this, I would eat until my stomach was uncomfortably full. I'd actually unbutton my top button and loosen my belt typically every year. And this year, I ate until I couldn't eat anymore, but my belly was never bigger. I didn't get uncomfortably full. I just got to the point where I wasn't interested in eating anymore. And I just stopped. And it was crazy, but it was the most comfortable Thanksgiving I've ever had. and it was great. So I hosted, so it was carnivore.
It makes eating food way more pleasant because
Yes.
you don't feel bloated, and so there's a difference between feeling full and that kind of fullness that you described, right, where you're just in a
Yes.
carbohydrate coma, basically. Your belly's sticking out, several more inches,
And then you're hungry 4 hours later. It's like the Chinese
And-
restaurant paradigm, right? For
and
real.
you're hungry, and you have a headache, maybe.
Yeah.
So it was just such a paradigm shift. And I don't know why I was so resistant. I was just ignorant of it. I didn't even conceptualize this before I had tried this. And it just makes you, it's very logical when you think about it. Our bodies are machines. And like any machine that runs on fuel, you have to have the proper fuel. It's like, yeah, can your lawnmower or your car run on an inferior fuel, like vegetable oil? Like maybe for a little while, like not very well. Your chainsaw might work it might get combustion and actually function for a little bit, but it's not going to function well. It's probably not going to function a very long time either.
Yeah, it's going to die early.
It's going to die early, and it's going to gum up all the works and ruin everything. And our bodies are very similar, and it's very logical in that regard. Our bodies evolved to use a certain fuel, and if we're putting the wrong stuff in there, even if it's edible and it keeps us alive for a while, it's not
survival food. It's survival food. And
Exactly.
So here's an interesting thing. When I was getting ready for schools, like I went to Warrant Officer Candidate School at Fort Rucker when I was 45. I was the oldest guy in the class. The average class age was 22. We had a bunch of pilots in there, a lot of street to seat guys and everything. So these guys are all running 7-minute miles. So I had to get ready for that school. And I did keto because carnivore just sounded like ridiculous. It's like, that's some kind of cult thing. I was like, whatever. And this was back in 2011. So I did keto and I lost a lot of weight like you did. I experienced the energy increase and the weight loss. I did not experience healing because I think what Chafee says is pretty accurate, that for every 1% you deviate from a pure carnivore diet or the optimum human diet, right, you're going to lose about 10% efficacy in that outcome of that diet. So I think the keto diet I did was probably 85 to 90% carnivore. And then, it was whole food for sure, but it wasn't, but I had seed oils and a lot of seed oils in there. So it wasn't even, it's probably in the 80 percentile. So I didn't get any of the healing benefits. I still had allergies. I still had all these problems, but I did get the weight loss and the energy increase. Nothing near like I had in carnivore. What was your experience when you went from that, when you lost that weight? Did you have any healing at that point? Or did you go to carnivore and find more and a better result?
Well, it was a gradual thing. I remember waking up one day and I'm like, because I had that lower back stiffness. I had that post-surgery pain that had just been with me. And I think I got out of bed one day and that kind of sit-up motion on a bed. And I'm like, like I didn't feel that normal stiffness that I usually do. And I just realized it used to be where if I stood for too long, if I sat for too long, I'd kind of feel that discomfort, that old pain hit me. It was very dull, but I just stopped feeling it at a certain point. And this was maybe a couple weeks into that very dirty keto. So I was seeing the healing results.
Okay.
Even at that stage, I didn't know anything about seed oils or what how stuff was cooked and how the oils can be a big player. But even that dirty version was enough to start seeing healing. I would say it really improved when I got back home and I could buy my own food. I was, sourcing my own food. It was of much better quality, much better meat in greater quantities. And it was a gradual thing. I was eating fruit for a long time still. I was eating some vegetables. I'd say for about 6 months until the end of 2021. It was still a whole food keto diet with fruits and vegetables. And I think at a certain point, I'm like, I don't like vegetables that much. Would it really hurt me to just get rid of them? Like maybe they're not doing me that much good. And as much as I love fruit, I did realize that I don't have any sense of self-control when it comes to fruit. I love pineapples. Right. But I could sit there and over the course of a couple hours, I'll just eat a whole pineapple by myself. And it seemed to be like almost a crutch, that same kind of sweet tooth. That was its last gasp, was the fruit in some ways. And when I got rid of the fruit, with red meat, as you know, with red meat or with eggs, there's no like overeating.
There's no addiction. Yeah, there's no craving for that.
You're not like you're not manically shoving the food in your face.
Right.
You can't. I mean, I challenge some. I know someone like Dr. Sean Baker. He eats, I don't know, 4 pounds of meat in a meal.
Yeah, guys.
I,
Off
I
the chart.
can't. I can't do more than maybe a pound and that, maybe 2 pounds if I'm like extremely hungry. But I challenge like anybody, no matter what they weigh. Like, go ahead and eat more than 2 pounds of red meat in a single sitting. Like, try to overeat it. You won't be able to.
Right.
Your body will tell you that's enough. I'm good. And this is the wonderful thing. We treat our human body like it's stupid. The way nutrition in general talks about the human body. You see this in these idiotic guidelines where they say, well, you can measure how many blueberries or how many things of lean protein you should have. The size of your hand. It's like, does a lion sit there in the wild? Is he got his paw out? Is he measuring how much red meat is he eating? No, he eats until he's full. There's no way that humans would have made it this far on the planet if we didn't have to think. If we had to think about it that hard, we never would have made it this far. So it's so much more of an intuitive diet. Well, I eat when I'm hungry, and then I eat until I'm not hungry anymore. And that's it. I don't measure anything. I don't weigh my food. I'm like, yeah, that slab of meat looks like it would hold me over for the next 12 hours or so, and that's it. And I don't think about it.
Yeah, and that's what I love to say, that this is the right way to eat, just because naturally you don't need a calculator, you don't need an app, you don't need to blow and do something or pee on something to figure out if you're doing it right. All you do is you eat, and it's like Chafee, he just simplifies it so much. Eat when hungry, eat till satiated, eat fatty meat and salt to taste, drink water. That's all you do. That's it. Boom, done, 100%. You want to do eggs? Fine. You can do a little organ meat? Fine. You don't have to. So who was your first doctor or carnivore, actual hardcore carnivore? You said, yes, I'm being carnivore. There had to be a demarcation point where you finally said, oh, okay, it's called carnivore. That's what I'm going to do. Who was the guy that you first saw or read about?
I think it was Dr. Baker. So this is about very early 2022. I gradually gotten rid of the vegetables and just stopped eating them. And the fruits, I was kind of up in the air about. I said, it's the new year. I've had this much success on the diet. I got into like my lowest. I was still about 190, 195. I'd kept all the weight off for 6 to 8 months at that point. But I felt like there was something missing in that. I'm like, well, I don't think I'm actually at my optimum health yet, my optimal health yet. I was very thin. I was still running quite a bit. And I said, I know what I had said after my surgery, I'm never going to lift again. But I see someone like Dr. Baker, and I see these other YouTubers these different fitness channels. And I'm like, maybe with all of this protein and added fat, like I wonder if I really could get back into lifting again. And so the two went hand in hand. So I wanted to get back into lifting. I wanted to improve my strength, because part of me felt that maybe the reason that I messed up my back so badly is because I was weak. And I wasn't strong enough to sustain what I was doing.
If you find value in my content and like my channel, please like and subscribe and click the notification bell so you see my new videos as soon as they come out. Also, please share this and other videos on social media, especially to veterans and first responders, who, as I say in many of my videos, are often suffering in silence. You never know who's hurting, and a video like this might just turn someone around. So please go ahead and share it, and thanks for your viewership and your support.
Yeah. On top of not having the right fuel. So I had seen Dr. Baker interviewed on a workout show. I can't remember what YouTube channel it was, and he's talking about this carnivore diet. He's 50-some years old, and he's a world record holder in rowing. Yeah. And I said, well, it works pretty well for that guy. And he had been in the military as well. He was an Air Force guy, and he had been very heavy at some point. So I saw, I'm like, well, maybe I could, maybe not be as insane as him, but I could do something like he did. And I put my mind to it in early 2022. I basically cut out what little was left of non-carnivore food. And it's been steady going for the past 2 years now. It's been about 2 years straight. And I've hardly deviated at all. There's been a holiday or two where I've eaten mom's cookies or brownies, and I always regret it. I don't feel well after that.
Yeah.
But I know even on those days where out of some obligation or whatever, you just eat the birthday cake, fine, eat the pizza. You'll be punished for it. but you know how to recover from it very quickly. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna eat a steak when I get home, and I'm gonna get some sleep, and I'm gonna work out tomorrow, and then I'll be fine. I'll be right back to my normal weight. And that's what I did. One of the things that sort of surprised me, as I started very gradually like getting into lifting, I'm talking like lifting the bar and then maybe adding like 10 pounds to it. Like I was not aiming for any records. I was very nervous. I was very nervous doing a deadlift for the first time in God knows how many years at that point.
I'm with you on that. I was too. I had back injury, same thing. So yeah.
But I was amazed at how fast. I was like, wow, that was really easy. And I'd come back the next, couple of days later, do it again at 10, 20 pounds. And within a few months, I was lifting more weight than I'd ever lifted before my surgery. And I said, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And so a very unusual thing started to happen, which I had never experienced before. I started gaining weight, but I was not getting fatter.
Yeah.
And this was a new experience. So I was gaining muscle weight. The clothes were still fitting exactly the same. The pant size was the same. The shoulders were getting broader.
Yep.
The chest was getting bigger. Muscles were getting firmer.
Yep.
They were growing out. And that was a very new experience. I ended up packing on another about 20 pounds over the next year and a half or so. So now I'm actually back at 215. I'm at 215, which is the same weight as when I joined the military.
Nice.
But my body composition is totally different than the 215 of 22-year-old me. I look very different. If I have a side-by-side comparison of a picture, my face looks way more bloated back then. I look way thinner now at 215 than I did at 22 at 215. It's a very strange thing if you're not accustomed to it.
Yeah, and I think I talk about this too. When I got out of the military, the last year I was in, I could not meet standard, and I was retiring anyway. So I'm like, screw it. I'm not going to fight my body because I was just putting on weight and getting more and more out of shape. So I didn't meet standard my last year. I retired out. I feel like right now, today, I could go back in and be a better soldier physically, mentally, emotionally than I was my last 5 years at least. I could walk right in and be better. And motivationally, my motivation levels are skyrocket. I don't know about you, but my motivation level for every little task I want to do, and I want to do it right. It's like that whole thing of procrastination gone now, where I used to have a lot of that in my life of little things I just didn't. If something I didn't want to do, I would put it off. Now it's like I just go tackle stuff, and it's part of your mind getting healed. I guarantee you it is. That's why I say if I could get a whole platoon of carnivores, imagine them competing against other platoons in a company or a brigade. It'd be amazing, right? Because if you could get them all to commit just to see what they could get done. I would love to do that. Boards, everything, soldier competitions, whatever. I think it just makes a huge difference in everything we do. And my initial experience with the carnivore diet were so great that in the first 90 days, I decided to start this YouTube channel. That's how great they were. I'd never wanted to be a YouTuber. That was not on the plan. I have a career. I have a business on the side. I have a son I'm raising. I got a busy life. And doing YouTube was never in the equation. But I just felt it was just such a big difference. I had to get this out to as many people as I could, especially, like I said, the vets. And lifting, like you said, I'm doing deadlifts now like I was in college again. It's crazy, man. And I thought I would never deadlift again in my life. And my back, I don't even get a twinge. It's like I never got injured. That's what it feels like for me. When I lift, I feel like I never was injured. It's crazy.
I feel the same way. I have the only reminder that I ever had that pain, that I ever had that surgery. I've got a big scar on my back. And that's the only reminder that I ever had it. I remember working out years ago, I felt like I was always kinking my neck, throwing out my back, doing stuff. Like, oh, I picked up the rucksack the wrong way and I threw out my back or something. I don't do that. I don't, even after workout, I'm sort of a lazy guy at the gym. Like I do my sets. I'm not doing them in any particular hurry. I'm not doing these super sets every 30 seconds. I'm really a lazy guy at the gym. I'm there to, get my workout in. I'll take it a half hour, an hour, however long it takes. But I don't feel sore after the work. Even when I'm lifting like the highest weights that I've ever lifted before for reps, I don't really feel sore in the morning. I don't have that same stiffness that I used to. If it's a totally new workout, like maybe a little bit. If it's a muscle I haven't activated in forever, but if it's something I'm fairly consistently doing, I don't.
Yeah, I changed my tricep workout. I changed it to one behind my head, And I did feel a little bit of tightness the next day, but that was it. And then it was gone. But one day I felt a little bit like just, and I went heavy. And before I was doing a lot of push downs and a lot of close hand bench press. And I decided, well, I'm going to do some over the head stuff, French curl style. And I did feel that a little bit, but just because it hit a different area of the muscle, hit further down, right? I don't know. It's crazy. And the other thing is when I work out, I run out of time. I don't get tired. It's like I could do more sets. It's just I got stuff I got to do, so I got to leave. I don't know about you, but I never really get to where I'm totally exhausted like I used to be in the gym.
Yeah, same way. I'm not trying to really get my sweat on so much as improve. I'm there to increase my strength. That's my goal. It's not to, and that's been another paradigm shift. I think as a result of the carnivore diet, it really changed my attitude towards working out.
Yeah,
I used to view working out as almost a maintenance protocol to keep the weight off. Right? It was like, okay, I have to do X number of minutes of cardio and sweat X amount of buckets in the gym if I want to just stay the same weight or lose a little bit. And so I actually spend way less time working out now. I need to. If I do 30 minutes and I get all the sets in that I wanted to, that's enough for me because it's about my goals for working out are totally different now. I'm doing this so I'm stronger, so I'm more functionally capable of handling life's, physical exertions. It's not about losing another pound or two.
No, yeah. It's functional fitness for me too. I'm getting older and I'm like, as Dr. Chafee says, I'm almost middle-aged. At 60, I'll be middle-aged because I'm going to go to 120, right? So that's the plan. So I want to make sure when I hit my middle age, I'm hitting with stride, like I'm ready to roll. And it's interesting because if you look at military history, you know that there were old soldiers who were frontline combatants in Rome and in Greece and all these other nation states where guys were in their 60s and still fighting, probably because they were eating real meat and they weren't eating a bunch of garbage. And if you do that and you're got good, pretty decent genes and you're a decent athlete, there's really no reason you couldn't. Look at Dr. Baker. Like you said, that guy's my age. He's a beast. So not unbelievable at all.
As part of that, I think what's really hopeful about this diet is that you can see phenomenal results at any age. I started it when I was 30 with a lot of health problems behind me. And I just feel so much more confident. I'm 34 now. Going into the rest of my 30s and my 40s. I talk to my peers or people that are younger than me sometimes, and they say, oh, once you hit 27, it's all downhill, you start falling apart. Well, that's true if you accept that paradigm. It really is.
Yeah.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I'm stronger, I'm healthier, I look better, I'm more confident than when I was 18 years old. There's a few gray hairs now, but I'm way better health than I've ever been as an adult, and probably certainly as a child. Yeah,
me too. And I was going to ask you, when you got out, are you still in reserves? Or you out now? You're still in, right?
I'm still reservist. So
are you a major? Okay, you're a major.
Yeah,
okay,
I'm a major now.
Cool. I was just curious. So I don't know if you follow Dr. Sean O'Mara. I think he's a veteran too. I know he's law enforcement. I think he's a National Guard guy too, but he's a doctor and he's the sprinting carnivore. Do you know what I'm talking about, Dr. O'Mara?
I have heard of him, yes.
Yeah. Check his videos out. I'm going to be interviewing him in the coming weeks. Okay. And he's got me sprinting now because you don't want to be a distance runner. You want to be a sprinter. He talks about the evolutionary origin of sprinting. Either you're running away from danger or you're hunting, right? And they have theories of how people back in the Stone Age days, or they'd be hunting parties, they would run down the antelopes, and the antelopes can't sweat. So they get them in the middle of the day, and humans can sweat, so they can keep running. And they run them till they couldn't run anymore, and they were easier to subdue. And pretty interesting theories they have. So I know you like that kind of stuff. You're talking about the theories of the origin of things. So he talks about that with sprinting. So I'm a sprinter now, and I tell you what, it has made a difference in my workouts. I incorporated sprinting, and I'm only doing 3 to 5 sprints a day and I do a random sprint. He said, make it random. So I have a random timer. I do it between 8 and 30 seconds each sprint. And I have a timer. When I hit start, it randomly picks a number between 8 and 32 and starts the timer. And I sprint until it goes off. And I get totally gassed. But anyway, check his stuff. Dr. O'Mara is pretty cool. I think you'd like that. So in addition to your physical health, because we know you've healed up a lot of physical injuries, what have the changes in your mental health been? Have you noticed any? And were you struggling with any mental health before you started this?
No, I was always very fortunate in that regard. That I think metabolic dysfunction, which I certainly had, always seemed to manifest in a kind of musculoskeletal way. And that went back to my childhood. I had tendonitis all the time. I had Osgood-Schlatter's in my knees when I was about 10 years old. I spent a lot of time on crutches as a kid. I think looking back, part of that was probably because I didn't have the proper diet. I was a growing boy. I was growing way too fast for my tendons and ligaments to keep up. And I think that kind of kept going into adulthood with the degeneration of discs and all the back pain and sciatica that I was having. So it always seemed to manifest in a very physical way. But so I never suffered from anxiety or depression. But I will say, even still, when I started the keto diet, and I think especially with the carnivore diet, is I noticed just way more mental clarity. Way more confidence. You look better, you feel better, and you're going to, I think, necessarily be more confident. In terms of just mental cognition, the cognitive benefits were something that I was not expecting or that I was aiming to get. But I noticed even on a kind of loose keto diet, my concentration was much higher. When I came back to grad school, I had one more year of grad school when I came back home from deployment. And I could sit and write an essay or read a book for hours without taking a break. I was reading like hundreds of pages in a book a day. And I'm like, I never do that. It's some boring history book. Like, usually I put this down after 20 pages, go do something else, get distracted. But the concentration that I was able to tap into, I was writing my thesis, my dissertation, and I felt like I was using the diet and a little bit of intermittent fasting, which I don't really do anymore so much, but back then I was kind of doing it like 24 or 48 hours at a time. And I would use that as a mental boost. I said, okay, I'm not going to eat anything for 2 days. And that second day, I'm going to use it to work on my paper, to work on my dissertation. And I felt like I was so in the zone when I would do that. On the carnivore diet, I feel like it's now just a kind of a constant thing. Unless I'm sick with a cold or a flu, which doesn't happen very often. I normally eat, during the week, I'll have one meal a day. I'll drink coffee at work. I'll come home, I'll cook a huge meal, and eat it all, and do the same thing the next night. And then on the weekends, I'll have maybe 2 meals. But at this point, for the past 2 years straight, it's just been a consistent, steady state. I don't have like down days. I don't get the SADs. I don't get random headaches that kind of bring me down or feel hopeless. I feel like I go on every day pretty much the same. Feeling confident, feeling strong, feeling like I know how to get through life, basically.
Yeah, I actually felt like less of a man when I couldn't make PT standard and I started putting on weight. And I did feel like less of a man. Like I wasn't as capable as I was when I was younger. I was always the athlete. I was military a long time. I did a lot of stuff. And I tell you, I don't know if you ever saw Austin Powers. I got my mojo back. Yeah. And I'm ready to roll. And I tell you what, I was reading something on it today. And also not just your confidence and your mental clarity and such, but what I was reading about it, it's from fasting that you get this too. And this is a fasting mimicking diet. So essentially you are fasting while you're eating this way. Your body is anyway. It thinks you are because ketones are high the whole time because you're running on a fasted diet. So you're running in a fasting mimicking diet, as Dr. Chafee points out. And some of the things you get is brain plasticity, which means your brain basically can adapt to things better. And the concentration comes from that. And also people are breaking addictions to other things while they're on this way of eating. I don't know if you've experienced any of this, but I don't drink alcohol as much as I used to. And it's not because I was trying to quit alcohol, because I really wasn't. I used to drink a bourbon every night when I started this diet. I did for the first 90 days or so. And then I just less and less, I'd forget to drink it and just go to bed. And now I've only had a couple of drinks since November with friends when they came over, and I just have a bourbon with them. And I've talked to people their gambling addiction's gone away, pornography addiction's gone away, addictions fade away. And it turns out that they used to treat people with opiate and alcohol addiction 100 years ago in the 30s. They used to treat them with water fasts, which exactly what we're doing. We're mimicking that fast in our diet. So I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, but I can tell you I have.
I have. I've had a very similar experience, and this was another thing that was very surprising. I mean, the first thing that I noticed and I talked about earlier was losing the sugar addiction, which was, I didn't think that was possible. that you could get rid of an addiction simply by eating something else in its place. But I had been a smoker since I was 17. I was like smoking cigars when I was 17 years old. And I kept smoking cigars, I would smoke pipes, and it was like not just a daily thing, I just smoked all the time, especially on deployment. It's like you got nothing else to do. And you just sit in the smoke pit at night or after the work shift, just smoke for hours, either on your phone or reading or what have you. And when I started doing this diet, I felt like I didn't enjoy smoking as much. At first, that's how it manifested. I'm like, well, I don't know, I just don't feel like smoking as much. So the frequency went down significantly. And then, at a certain point, I blew through all the tobacco, and I'm like, well, I'll go buy some eventually. I'll get some more. And I just didn't for a very long time. And I went back, and I'd gone, I don't know, a year or so without smoking. And I was back home in Ohio, back in the fall. I picked some up, I smoked for a little bit. And it was like, I mean, it's nice. It's something social to do, I guess. But I haven't smoked since. And I don't think I will go back to it ever. It doesn't bring the same, it doesn't tickle the neurons in the brain like it used to. And I didn't have withdrawals from it. I didn't feel the need to smoke. It just kind of withered away, the desire to smoke. And alcohol has been very similar. So even when I was doing this diet, I was still drinking beer for a while. And I used to drink quite a lot actually, especially when I was at active duty. And I look back, I'm like, my God, that was the most unhealthy I ever was in my life when I was on active duty, working out more than ever. But I'd come home every night and I would have a couple beers, have some liquor. And that got less and less over the years, but especially on keto.
Yeah.
I stopped keeping alcohol in the house completely. So I would only do it if I went out to like a party or a special occasion or something. And then I gradually stopped drinking beer. And I said, okay, well, I'll drink some tequila, some vodka here and there. And then even that is really faded the past year or so to where I am perfectly content with not drinking. And even when I'm around people who are drinking, I'm like, well, I could do without it. It's fine. And
I've gone out and drank sparkling water when everyone else is drinking. Get a bottle and drink that. I've done that in the past. When I do drink, though, it's usually around veterans. And it's like when I go out with the vets, we're like, all right, let's have a bourbon and we'll talk. And that's very social. And I do have a bottle of bourbon here that a veteran bought me. And we drank a couple glasses like a month ago. And it's just sitting there. And it's fine bourbon, man. It's expensive. It's nice. Yeah. I just have no desire, especially if there's no one here. Whereas before, I would do it alone. That was the way it was. So yeah, I think it's an amazing thing that you don't expect. One of those unexpected non-scale victories. And I love those things, man. What other non-scale victories can you think of that you had? Is there any other like allergies or headaches or anything that you could think of that just changed, that surprised you?
Oh yes. So sleep quality. I guess looking back, I wouldn't have said at the time that I slept poorly, but very easily distracted at night. I would just sit and fall asleep watching videos or whatever. And just way too much light exposure and never really getting a significant amount of sleep. Like, okay, I'll sleep 5 or 6 hours. I'm more or less functional if I do that. But something I have been more deliberate about on this diet, since I started this diet, even with a young child, it's actually still become easier than it was before. And when I do sleep, even if it is only for 6 or 7 hours, I feel like the quality of that sleep is so much better than it used to be. So it's not even about the amount of hours per se, but it is the quality. It's noticeably different. And I feel like I fall asleep much faster. I wonder if part of that is because I'm doing a lot of really heavy lifting. And that's actually really, even if I'm not sweating, that is really tiring for the pain in the body. So that's part of it.
I don't sweat as much as I used to. I don't know about you.
I don't either.
But I think body temperature regulation is optimized. Like everything gets optimized. So I think I wonder if the cold, I've not been in the cold since I've been on this diet really, but I'm wondering if it would regulate better there too. I imagine it would. I used to sweat at the drop of a hat and it was terrible. And now it's pretty amazing. And then falling asleep, I sleep about 6.5 hours a night, but I feel like I got over 8 when I wake up. I go to bed around 9:30 to 10. I get up around 4:30 every morning. And I just wake up. And when I wake up, I spring up. I'm not like dragging my butt and I got to sit here for a half hour before I can get, I'm like up and doing stuff right away. And I feel like just doing stuff. I don't know about you, but it's great.
Very similar. And I never feel the need I was never a big like nap guy. I didn't have to take my afternoon siestas or anything, but I never feel the need to. I don't get the crash. I don't get that 2 p.m., 3 p.m., like you see people, they have a big lunch and they're just dragging at that hour. I never feel that way. Like the energy level is consistent from the moment I wake up until it's time to go to bed. And the energy level is really high until I like shut my eyes and then I'm asleep within 10 minutes.
How do you stay motivated to stick to this diet? Is it hard? Do you find it hard? Or what's your experience with sticking to this diet and not falling off?
Well, I guess in an abstract way, my motivation now, I have a young daughter. She was born in late 2022, and I want to be not just alive for well into her life, but I want to be vigorous and healthy and like physically present, not just like a kind of a ghostly figure that, isn't with 1,000-yard stare in a photo someday, but someone whom she has memories of doing physical things, throwing her up in the air, playing with her. So that's a big kind of conceptual motivation. But in terms of kind of the day-to-day of it, this is the easiest diet that I've ever been on. It's not hard. I think we do people a disservice sometimes when we tell them that getting healthy or getting in shape is the willpower thing. You have to want it so bad. And if you fail, then that means you didn't want it hard enough. And I think it's not a willpower thing, because there's two reasons that people fail a diet or any lifestyle change when it comes to food. And there's two reasons, and they're both very closely related. Number one, you're hungry all the time.
Right.
And your willpower, like that hunger is like older than humanity, right? It's like part of being an animal. And the idea that your willpower is going to overcome this biological need, humans will, like, if they're starving enough, they'll eat tree bark. They'll resort to cannibalism. Like your willpower is not going to ever defeat that kind of instinct. So that's number one. You're hungry all the time. Number two, you crave all this terrible stuff. And so they're closely related to each other. You're hungry and you're hungry for the really bad stuff. The genius of the carnivore diet is that it neutralizes both of those problems. You're not hungry. And then the cravings go away, of course.
Yep.
And so once you solve the two biggest problems, it's easy. Your body, at least for me, after a couple days of this, I was craving this food. Like what I really want, like a lot of red meat. I want a lot of eggs, cheese. I still eat a lot of dairy. I don't have any problems with it. So a lot of cheese. I didn't lack for willpower before this diet. I didn't lack for discipline. Like I was running like all the time. It's not easy, but doing less work and seeing more results when I changed to this diet. It shouldn't be hard. Like it actually should not be hard to eat, and you shouldn't have to put much thought into it, really. And if and if you're miserable on the diet, and if you're hungry all the time, you're not eating enough, or you're not eating the right stuff. It's just
you're not eating the right foods. You need to eat food that'll actually satiate you, that has fat in it. And that's the problem. And the thing is, the reason every time I did keto, I always felt great. I had the energy, I lost the weight, and I thought this time for sure I'm going to keep it. I'm going to stay on this forever. I always said that, and it never happened. And I attribute that to the fact that you're managing an addiction. You're counting how many carbs you can eat per day. And the carbohydrate addiction is going to beat that. It's just like you're an alcoholic saying, I'm only going to have one shot of bourbon a day or something, right? And sooner or later you're going to fall off and you're going to drink the whole bottle. But you're not going to be able to just keep yourself, because you're fighting your addiction. The only way to do it is to kill the addiction, to remove the addictive substance from your diet. And then it's easy, right? That's the thing. That's the truth.
Absolutely.
So
this is why a diet of moderation is just a recipe for failure.
It is.
I could not, if I limited myself to 50 carbohydrates a day, I would fail. I would fail this diet miserably. It's like, okay, you can have like 4 Oreos a day. I would be a wreck. You have to eliminate it completely. And that sounds like really severe. It sounds like, well, that's very extreme because, it's all about moderation. But really, it's not good to moderate a bad thing.
Moderating poison is bad, right? Moderating poison. How much cyanide would you like to have today? Like none? How about strychnine? None of this stuff. I don't want any of it. It is a poison. And the seed oils, the sugar, all that stuff's poisonous. You just got to get out of your diet, and then your body will do, like we said earlier, amazing things that will surprise you. And like you said, I think people approach this and think, well, that's way too hard because they've failed at every diet they've done before, because every diet before has been restrictive. It has been restricting hours that you can eat, or days that you can eat, or calories that you can eat, or carbohydrates you can eat. And they're all not natural. Like you said, there's not a lion in the wild that ever did any of that. They never said, oh, I better not hunt that elk right there because it's not the right time. I got to wait another day. That's ridiculous. If that elk's there, they're going to eat it, and they're going to leave meat behind because the jackals are going to come in there and eat it. And then the cavemen are going to come in and eat it, whatever, the Cro-Mags, they're going to come eat off that. Yeah, you just eat when you're hungry. And that's the thing. So I think when you're fighting against our evolutionary, or if you're a Christian, the way we were designed, if you're fighting against that, whichever you believe, doesn't matter, you're going to lose every time. And I'm proof, and I think almost everyone is. So they see this diet and they put it in that context. These diets are all hard, and this one seems harder, but it's actually the opposite. It's a force multiplier. It's the easy way. And you just don't know it till you get there. It takes 30 days to find it, I think.
Yeah. It's weird because we live in this modern industrial age, but it's like we've completely forgotten how humans used to live. It's like we have complete amnesia before anything before like 100 years ago. Just imagining how people ate, how they lived, how they survived. And it's funny, we talked a little bit about like ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks. If you go back and read Homer, you read the Odyssey, you read the Iliad, Achilles and Odysseus are never sitting down and eating a salad, right? When they have their feast, they're having these big hunks of lamb and the fat's melting off the bones. And there's these like total feasts of gluttony of meat and fat and cheeses. And there's some bread in there too and some wine, but they're not eating spinach. They're not eating cauliflower. Like these are warriors who are surviving off of meat. And you see it in the Bible too. You see it in scripture. You see it in old literature. You see it even closer to modern times. Someone like, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. James Salisbury during the Civil War. He was an early proponent of what we would consider the carnivore diet, effectively. He invents the Salisbury steak, partly as a solution, or as a proposed solution for Union soldiers to avoid getting all these diseases when they're on campaign. And it's such a tragedy that there's no institutional memory of that. There's total amnesia. And so we're left with this nutrition kind of regime in the current military that's a disaster for veterans' health.
It is. It's a complete disaster. And I think you need to come on one of my Wednesday shows where we talk about this stuff, because it's not an accident. It's because the institutions are funded by corporations that have a financial interest in that not being the answer. A lot of corporations are different. The food side, the medicine side, there's a lot of funds in there, and there's a lot of political power. And I mean, you can go back to look at the British Navy in the 18th century, 19th century. They actually treated scurvy with a fresh meat diet. They have a fresh meat protocol, because if you take grains out of their diet, they're not eating bread. And same with Napoleon. He did the same thing. And you treat troops with scurvy with just fresh meat. They don't have the same vitamin C requirement they do when they have grains introduced to their diet, because they need, like Dr. Chafee says, milligrams instead of nanograms. And a steak or fresh meat, horse meat, has all the vitamin C you could ever need, as long as you don't introduce this other stuff to your diet. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. We have lost a lot of that. You can look at Otto Warburg and the Warburg effect for fighting cancer. He won the Nobel Prize. And I don't get it where people don't go back and look at that. And Gary Taubes is big on that. And they're all talking. These guys, love watching these guys talk about that. I wish we could just get that message out. And that's the purpose of this channel here. And I'm so glad you came. I'm going to give the floor to you for the end here. And I just want you to speak to any veterans that maybe your friends, or maybe just some veteran that's just jumping on and looking at this saying, hey, what is this? What would you recommend they do if they wanted to approach this diet? And would you recommend they do that, and why?
Yeah, so I know that there's a lot of veterans out there, guys that I knew while I was in the active duty, and guys I know, friends I've known over the years who've since left the service, who have struggled with all sorts of physical ailments, with chronic health issues, whether it's physical, whether it's severe mental stress. And sometimes, and it's often the case, that they have many of these things at the same time. They usually don't just get one chronic issue. You get 4 or 5 of them together. And we tend to treat these as totally isolated problems. So you go to a specialist, he's going to treat your mental illness, and this guy is going to treat your gastrointestinal problem, and this guy is going to treat your neurologic, your back problem, and your sciatic nerve. And you think of these all as a bunch of totally unrelated illnesses and issues that you're having, when in fact they're very likely all related to each other, and they're all stemming from metabolic dysfunction, because your body's not properly fueled. It's severely inflamed. And the way I think about inflammation, I don't have a medical background, so this is a very crude sort of understanding of it. But in effect, genetics is not your destiny. Genetics tells you what you're predetermined to be affected by. So you can't change that. If I'm predisposed to gut issues or diabetes because of my family, I can't change that predisposition, but I can change whether or not I actually have it. And the way I think about inflammation and metabolic syndrome is that it is a manifestation of what those predispositions are. So in my case, when I was not properly fueling my body, it manifested in inflammation that caused nerve pain, that caused all sorts of ligament issues, that caused bone issues, disc issues. And for other people, it seems to affect them very differently. It seems to be gut issues. They get ulcerative colitis. They get severe mental stress. And the hopeful thing to me about the carnivore diet is that it is deciding that you are not, in fact, a slave to your genetics, and that's not your destiny. That your health actually is something that can be manipulated by you in a very positive way. That in a very short amount of time, in a very short time span. And that's the thing, it's not a years-long treatment. There are people, and myself included, who suffered for years from all sorts of issues, whether it's the food addiction, whether it's physical ailments, and in a very short span of time, we remedied those and made them things of the past, as I think you have done as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, that you can do that only through diet alone is something I think extremely empowering. It's not restricting. It's not extreme. It's something that's incredibly empowering to me, that I have that level of control over my own life. And that's what I would say to a lot of veterans out there, because I think there's a lot of them who, they've been in the service, they suffer from all these ailments, and it becomes like a self-reinforcing feeling of failure. The rate of obesity amongst veterans and active duty servicemen is very high. It's like 20%. That's not even counting the overweight. The diabetes level is much higher amongst veterans than it is amongst the general population. Is that because veterans are lazy?
No. Yeah.
Is it because we don't know how to take care of ourselves? We lived a lifestyle that was only sustainable as long as we kept up this kind of insane level of physical exertion. And as soon as we stop that, we just start falling apart. So again, I think it's something incredibly empowering.
And I think it's transformative in such a short period of time. The only thing I can think of from a veteran would appreciate is when you go into basic and you come out 6 weeks later, the difference in the person that came in and left, right? And that's the kind of change, that's literally the kind of transformation you get, but on a physical, emotional, like you said, self-empowering, confidence. I mean, all that stuff. And you got a lot of that coming out of basic too. You know that when you went in, you went back home after basic, you were a different person and it was completely different. And that's what this is, that kind of thing. It really is.
I think you have to be prepared to you have to be self-confident enough to deal with the criticisms and deal with the weird stares.
Yeah.
And I've gotten this from family, from most recently from my doctor, which is its own funny story. They look at you like you're crazy. They see that you're clearly healthier, you're happier, you're more confident, you look better, your skin looks better, everything. You're tanning, but you're not getting sunburn. It's another weird thing about this diet. And yet they're like, well, yeah, I can see you've lost 35 pounds and you've never lifted more weights in your life, but what about your cholesterol? You know? And it's weirdly enough, I mean, it's been my experience that I've only gotten the kind of suspicious question after I've gotten healthy. Like then that's when people start asking you the probing questions about your health.
Yeah.
It's
no one worried when you're eating a sleeve of Oreos, no one had a thing to say, right? But now they want to, now they want to know, wow, are you worried about heart attack? Like, well, why didn't you bring that up when I was eating a pizza the other day? You know, I mean,
are you sure you want to eat the fat on that strip steak there? I don't know.
Crazy.
I'm actually really curious. Have you gotten like any blood work or medical tests that you can compare yourself now to the past? And did you see any differences?
Yeah, I go to the VA every year for I'm a disabled vet, so I get my VA service. And when I went last year, let's see, March 22nd is when I started Carnivore. I went like 40 days into it to my annual thing. And I had lost like 26 pounds 40 days after I started. And I went in, I felt great. I looked better. You feel amazing that first couple months, like off the charts amazing. I felt like I was a teenager again. And I went in, I told the doc, and she looked at my blood work, goes, yeah, it looks pretty good. It looks better before. And she said, when I told her I was on carnivore, she's like, oh, well, you know, you should really restrict your fats. I'm like, well, I'm not going to. And then she goes, well, I want to put you in for another panel in 6 months then, and we'll discuss. I'm like, hey, that's great. That's perfect. I get another free blood work to compare to the last one. This is great. I said, yeah, let's do it. So I'm all excited. So then I go back in 6 months later, and now I'm no longer, let's see, I started at 280. I was like 250 something. Now I'm 230 something pounds. I'm 234 when I go in, and I'm trim. I'm down from I was a 44 waist tight.
Wow.
And now I'm like, when I went back in, I was like a 36 loose. Right now I'm like a 34 loose. I'm getting down to about 32 like I was in college. And so my waistline just shrinking. I'm putting muscle on. I wasn't even lifting weights yet then. I didn't start lifting weights till December. I joined a gym and said, I'm going to see if I can lift like I did in college. I started doing my exact same routine I did when I played rugby. And it's amazing what it does to your body. This is an anabolic. It is an anabolic diet, 100%. You're going to put muscle on like you wouldn't believe. But so I went in and she looked at my blood work and she goes, I wanted to put you on some thyroid stuff. She goes, but your numbers are all getting better. They're trending better. And she still said, stay away from fats because she's just trained and it's ingrained. And also in the VA, they have to adhere to the standard of care because that's what they get graded on. So they can't really go off that script because that's the government line. And I get it. So I just ignore her. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fine. I'm just doing my thing. We'll see. But I guarantee you, if someone want to put me on statins or something, which they don't because I'm good, but if they did, I would definitely ask them if they knew what the number needed to treat was for that and what the absolute risk versus the relative risk is of the actual taking the drug and of getting the disease. Because they don't know. Most doctors just don't even know what that is. And I point them to people like Dr. Diamond or Zoe Harcum, who has the number needed to treat. Have you seen her stuff? She's got the number needed to treat website.
I saw her interviewed, I think, on Dr. Chafee's
show. She's great. She's really brilliant. But listen, we're up against the hard time here. It's been a great hour and 12 minutes now. Bradley, I'm going to drop you off, say goodbye to everybody, but stick around and we'll say goodbye afterwards, okay?
All right, Larry, thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks, Bradley. Appreciate you.
Thanks. Take care.
All right. That was another great interview. Bradley's just really insightful, had a lot of good experience to share. If you're a veteran and you are thinking about this, I would just recommend you go ahead and try it out. This is something you can do without going to a doctor. You don't have to sign up for therapy. You don't have to meet with counselors. You can just change what you eat and try it out. And I challenge you to do that because this has changed my life. It's changed Bradley's life. It changed all these other veterans who I've interviewed. If you haven't seen, go check out or listen to the podcast, Mission Carnivore, and you'll find out what I'm talking about. Anyway, that's all I got to say tonight, guys. Stay strong and overcome. Carnivore Soldier out.